All right. Good evening. Happy Thursday. Happy June. First of all, welcome to another video podcast episode of Brown Girls Sound Off, where we center and amplify the voices of women of color. I am Tony Whitland, and I am joined by the beautiful Nafisa Carter and the beautiful Edwina Jones. You might notice that we are missing a rectangle, right? Normally we have the beautiful Chantel Randolph with us, but she was not able to make it with us tonight. But she is here with us in spirit, and I know you're watching. So hey, sis, hey. If it is your first time watching one of our podcast episodes, please let us know that in a comment. We would love to know if we have any new viewers in the house, and if you are an oldie but goodie, let us know that as well. But nevertheless, I cannot believe, and I'm a little upset that my birthday month has flown by like this. How in the world is it already June 3rd? That is like crazy, right? But I'm sure that my educator friends are like, yeah, let's go. So, and Wayne's like, that part. So, if you joined us last month, you know that we talked all about mental health because May was Mental Health Awareness Month. For the month of June, we are doing a little bit of remixing, right? But did you know, right? And big ups to Nafisa, who made us all aware of this. Did you know, everyone, that June is Children's Awareness Month? I didn't even know there was a such thing. But thank you so much for letting us all in on that. And so it's only fitting that we talk about children, specifically that this month we especially begin the month talking about parenting as women of color. The three of us identify as Black women, parenting as Black mothers, because we've talked a lot about our identities already, ourselves in relationships, in our homes, in our workplaces. And we've all actually brought up our children in various episodes, but we haven't really focused on our experiences as women of color who have children, who are raising children. And so I hope that for those of you who are watching, you find something really useful, something that you can identify with, not just in our previous episodes, but obviously this month. And we're talking about whether you have given birth to children, whether you're raising children, you're working with them, but we're going to be talking about our experiences as mothers. So let's jump right on in it. I know that, as we were growing up, right, we all received messages about parenting, right? There needs to be a whole book called like Parenting While Black, and maybe there is one, I'm sure. But we received lots of messages about parenting and what that meant, what that looked like, what it should look like. And so, what I want to spend like just the first couple of minutes talking about is, what messages did you all receive about parenting? And these can be messages that came from within the home, things that you saw from other people who were parenting, stepping into that role, or whether they biologically came into that role, whatever, or outside the home. So whether they were messages you received, through the media or wherever. So what were some of the messages that you all and Edwina, I'll go to you first. What were some of the messages that you received about parenting growing up?
That is very interesting. I was sitting here trying to think like, no one ever like really said anything to me. It was more of like just watching people being parents that I receive messages of what might seem to be more important to people when raising their children. But as far as like someone saying, like, girl, raise your kids like this way or whatsoever, I didn't receive anything like that. What I did see, I was able to figure out whether I want to be that type of parent. So it was more so on that route where it's like, okay, I don't want to be that type of parent, or I want to be this type of parent. And then just my experience with different mothers growing up, I took to that message, and I would say that kind of like imparted within when I part of my mothering process.
Mm-hmm. So
Yeah.
do you mind sharing? Oops, sorry. Do you mind sharing? I guess like some of those specific messages. I'll go first, and maybe you're still thinking about it. So you're right. I mean, Absolutely. When I threw this question out there, it wasn't about like what did someone tell you, but because we're always receiving messages. So I'll just say, like growing up, I, in a Black family, I received a lot of messages around like who has the right to parent. And so that looked like any and everybody, right? So that looked like your aunt being able to correct you and parent you, that right? Aunt Tina was, and Aunt Zena, they were my second and third, they're twins, my aunts, y'all. They were like my second and third mamas, and my grandmother was another mama, right? There might have been next door Miss Monica. She fed me like she was my mama, So in growing up, I received a lot of messages around like community parenting, that we all take care of the children that we care about, right? And we all take care of the children of the people that we care about. And so, I also saw growing up, it was not unusual to see other family members actually raising children. Right. And so it just like growing up, I felt that parenting was this community type of thing, and that everyone pitched in. So I don't know if you want to kind of like add to that.
Yeah, I definitely want to add to that, because I definitely grew up in a communal part of, I felt like I was raised in a community where everyone kind of like had a hand in my raising, whether it's my immediate family. And I come from a huge family, so huge that I don't even know how big it is what I'm saying. So, and I was raised by, in my, I'm a little non-traditional household. So my father had several wives. And so I was the child of not his first, but probably his last wife. And so I was actually raised by my father's first wife and her children. So I grew up in that community. And so each person had a little bit of, I guess, what's the word I'm looking at? A hand, I guess, in raising me. But then also there was, I want to say like my school family, like the friends that I grew up with, their moms also had a part in raising me. Like when it was time for field trips, like other, my friend's mom would like take me for the car rides and, buy me things to add to the pot or whatsoever. And so it was definitely more of a community in the neighborhood, as well as that immediate family parenting style.
And, thank you so much for sharing that. One thing, before I get to Nafisa, one thing I can't help but to think about is, it's funny when you talk to me or talking to you and talking to, other Black and brown women that I know that grew up in this way, is such a contrast to the way that we're often portrayed. Because I also think about, like messages that I received from outside, from the media, or just different places. I can't even put a name on it. Like there's this idea that, from my perspective, there's an idea that like, Black and brown children just kind of cast off, like nobody cares for us, and so, I just think about the ways in which, I've heard and I've seen Black and brown families, represented and or talked about. And it's such a difference from the way that I actually grew up, and sounds like from the way you actually grew up, where we didn't just have like one person, there were many people taking care of us. And I do obviously want to acknowledge that that's not everyone's experience, right? But I just wanted to share that there is that contrast that I'm always, constantly, when I'm speaking about my experiences growing up, and people assume because I grew up in a certain place or whatever the case may be, or the color of my skin, that, oh, you must have had it rough. And it's like, well, actually, no, I didn't. You know what I mean? I had a lot of people looking out for me. You know what I'm saying? So I just wanted to throw that out there. So yes, there is Black love, Black joy, and all that in the Black community. Nafisa, what about you? What are some of the messages you received about parenting growing up?
Well, I mean, you guys talked enough about community, but I definitely want to touch on that because I feel like that is huge in our culture. Like you said, it's not just your immediate family, but like you said, it's your aunts, your uncles, your grandmother. your next door neighbor, your friend's mom. So I definitely had that. And my house was actually the house. Like each of my siblings, we had like a friend that just like never left. Like they would stay for like months. Like they would bring their little bag and they wasn't going home. Like their mom's like, well, are you coming home? Can we see?
Nope.
They did not want to leave. So my house was that house because that's just how my mom was. She was just so welcoming. So that community piece, I feel like is so huge. And I saw that example as well. And I lived that in my house. Another thing that was huge, just respect, just really just respecting your elders. That was really huge. And like my parent, my dad talked about that, my mom, my grandmother, that was something that I was told, but I saw in action in my family that you respect your elders. And one of the things that was said that always kind of stuck with me, but now that I'm older and I kind of unpack it more, I don't agree with it. But like, like I remember my grandmother would say, like, children were seen and I heard, like, you seen and I heard. And I was like, to some extent, some things aren't, appropriate for children to be around. But then also I feel like, no, they need to be heard. They need to have a voice as well. We need to listen too, right? So that was a message that I definitely remember, like just reoccurring often, in my culture, in our culture. And the more that I think about it, now as I've gotten older, I'm like, that's not actually okay. Let's unpack that a little bit.
And we're gonna be talking about that next week some more about communication. Yes. I cannot wait to go there because that is something we absolutely have to really start to unpack in our community. And I'm thinking about some of the things that I hope to remember by next week to bring up. But I think that there's a lot of layers to that as well, right? Yes. And I think that as you stated, as we're raising our own children, we're thinking about ways to peel back those layers, get underneath of all that, right? Get underneath of all that. So so that we can do better because we know better, know differently rather. So thank you all for sharing that. So now what I'm thinking about, because here at BGSO, everything is tied to everything that we do in the world is tied to our identities and the way that we're showing up. So what I want to know is when we think about, so we've already talked about like our experiences growing up and reflected on messages, what parenting looked like in our households and communities. But now we have our own children. I think we've got 6 children between us right here. We got our own little village. Yeah. If you are watching and you also have kids, please type in the comments. We'd love to know how many children you have. Again, whether you gave birth to them, whether you are helping to raise them, the children in your life, we'd love to learn more about them. I'll just quickly share before we go on to the next question. I have a 15-year-old and 11-year-old. What about you, Nafisa? How old is your little one?
I have a 10-year-old daughter, soon to be 11.
Yes. What about you, Edwina?
I have a 14-year-old daughter, 11-year-old daughter, and an 8-year-old son.
Oh my God, we are raising like preteens and teens.
Yes.
Okay. So I already know what we're dealing with, right? Lots of adventures, lots of joyous occasions. But so now that we have, children of our own, when we think about our identities, like how do you feel that your identities, and your experiences around them actually influence or shape your parenting style or decisions that you made? And specifically what I'm wondering is, do you feel that there's something different about being a mom of color? Like what seems unique about our experience? And while I give you two ladies something to think about, I want to share a quick story really quick. So when I was thinking about discussing this topic, I immediately thought about something recent that I observed. And then we just like, I already know where you're going with this. And then, I was thinking about what seems to be unique about, our experiences. And, for me, I feel like, because of the way that Black and brown folks are often perceived out in the world, and we're more likely to be seen as aggressive, as threats, as to this, to that. I know that me, also having those experiences have shaped the way that I've raised my kids, right? To not make too much noise, not take too much space, and make sure that you are considerate of others. And, I was recently out of town, and, there was...
Uh-oh, you muted yourself.
Sorry, my bad. I was recently out of town. There was a white family with some kids who they weren't toddlers, right? They appeared to be, I would say between 7 and preteenish. But anyway, around 7 a.m., they started making a lot. I mean, like yelling, screaming, and yelling, like to the tops of lungs, running. It was like all of that. And I couldn't help but think, honestly, I was like, wow, if that were, a group of Black kids, well, first of all, if that were my kids, and this is not a judgment zone, but I'm just being honest because I would have to make a different decision. Like I would have to think, I would be thinking, I don't want, us to get put out of this hotel. I don't want them to call management, so that determines. So like I started thinking, what's 7 in the morning? My kids I would have to make sure they lay down, or you're going to be quiet until I think everyone is awake, things like that. So that's what immediately came to mind. I thought about like, well, what are some of the differences in the ways that we, tend to parent our children, because it definitely does seem to be a difference from my perspective. So I just wanted to know more from your perspective. Nafisa, what do you think? How does your identity or your experiences shape the decisions you make for your daughter?
Well, I know for me, like you said, my parents like definitely taught my sisters and my brother about just the different little microaggressions that you will just constantly like experience, with being a person of color, whether it be like, getting on the elevator first, getting off the elevator first. When you're walking, they expect you to move out the way, even if you got to hop into moving traffic, giving you your change and putting it on the counter instead of handing it in your hand. Cause it doesn't make you feel good when they do that. It's just little things, not speaking, doing that little, when you actually verbally say hello. I think we all experienced that.
Girl, I did it. I experienced it today.
Girl, and that's my pet peeve. You got one time to do it. And guess what? You will never have a chance again. So next time I see you, guess what I'm doing? We can both do that. So I think about that really helped shape my identity. And my parents were just like, that was like ingrained in me. And, they always taught me like this, pointing out things I was growing up, well, they don't want to show you in society, beautiful and, Black people in our culture, because I was running around. I remember when I was younger and I had a sheet and I stuck it on my head and it was going all the way down to the ground and I was shaking, because the sheet was supposed to be my hair.
Oh, okay.
Like, what is that? And I was like, that's my hair. And she was like, no, that's not. She said, your hair doesn't look stringy and long like that. Your hair is, thick and curly, and you love and you embrace your hair. And she was, taught me about, my heritage, had me look at people that looked like us, who were kings and queens, and Egyptians, Africans. I had those images around me. So that was ingrained in me. So I thought about that when I was raising Zori. Like I remember the little cartoon Sophia the First. And I was like, oh, when she was watching it, and nobody really looked like Zuri. And Sophia the First was a little princess, a queen, or whatever. And, she was of royalty. And I told her, I said, oh, you can't watch that. We're going to watch Doc McStuffins. A Black, a Black little girl who wants to be a doctor. And I said, this is a positive and good images. And I always kind of talked her through things like that and pointed it out to her, to the point that she embarrassed me too. One time I was out at lunch and with my white girlfriend and her son, and they was talking about little shows they watched. She was about 4. And she was like, oh, do you watch Sophia the First? She said, my mom said, I can't watch that because there's nobody Black on there. Nobody looks like me. I can't watch it. And I was like, and she was like, oh, she turned bright red. And she was like, oh, okay. I was like, yep, that's right. I was like, all that stuff is important and it gets ingrained in them. And even when she was at school, they were showing Beauty and the Beast. And she said, I can't watch Beauty and the Beast because nobody looks like me on here. That's of royalty. And you know what? One of the workers came to me and was like, you know what? I couldn't say anything, but I was like, yeah. So that was so ingrained in me. So I'm just always just like on that with Zori. And if I see stuff, whether it be a commercial, I was like, you know what? Yeah, she's beautiful, but so are you. They don't always show us and put us in those images. So we have to like teach our kids to love themselves and to love their African features and their thick and her curly hair. My daughter wore braids and stuff, but I encourage her to wear her afro and whatever else. And that's beautiful. You know, your hair doesn't have to look European the way they portray everything mostly on TV. It's gotten much better than when we were younger. Much better.
It
much
has.
better.
Because the only
Much
dogs
better.
we had was what was on in Kenya?
Honey, that's it. It's gotten much better. I mean, you see people with natural hair on, you know, national TV, the news, everything. I think the person who was on did a dress for the White House had like a little natural fro just recently. So it's gotten much better, but you know, it's still there. So that's something that is ingrained in my identity that has absolutely, you know, affected like my role and how I you know, how I parent. It definitely has precipitated that.
Ooh, girl, lots of laughs. Thank you so much for sharing that. It made me, you're right. It made me think about, you know, the ways that our identities, especially as Black moms, shape. Yes, I, you know, started out by talking about the way that we discipline and you know, and keep our kids, you know, honestly, it's actually for their safety, keep them safe, and ways that we also keep them emotionally safe, right? Right. And so helping them to love on themselves. I remember one of my first books that I purchased for my daughter was the I Love My Hair book. Right? It was one of the first books. And then I think, girl, then I went and bought a second copy. So she had like two copies, you know, but I was very adamant about not wanting her to think that she had to like perm her. I got a perm when I was 5. You know what I mean? But we're taught to like that this is good hair. This is good skin. This is a good complexion. This is a good, you know what I mean? And yes, I'm sure that lots of women can argue, well, there's a lot of pressure on all women. Yes, and when you layer on that extra melanin, honey, there's a whole lot of extra stuff that's added to that in terms of how wide your nose is, how this, that, you know, how full your lips are. But now they're getting Juvederm, right? Don't. But I'm just saying, you know, now folks are plumping them lips up, you know, and all that other kind of stuff. So I think it's great that we make sure that our kids love themselves. Edwina, how about you? So what are some ways that your identity shapes the way that you parent or make decisions for your kids?
Well, I've always been academically strong, and I feel like that has always been like my go-to. One of the things I always was promoting like academics and especially like reading. You know, I was like a big reader growing up, and so one of the things that I always kept around my house, there are like bookshelves like in every room, every child's room, my room, in the basement, like there's a bookshelf. So that was just one thing I always wanted them to. You can be whomever, but I always wanted them to be grounded in like strong academics. And that's a good thing. But then the more they grew and the more I read, and I guess the world opened up more, I realized I started looking at, you know, the other folks and how their kids tend to be a lot like freestyle, right? It's like they do the academics, but then they take a year off to go sailing. So I just be like, what, you know, so when I started seeing things like that, I was like, you know what? Let me expose them to other things outside of the books. Like, you know, like books are great, but it's like, so is the world outside. And so like wanting to stop doing presents more so and start like experiences was gifts that I wanted to start giving to my children. Let's go this place, let's see this, and really like doing that more so than being just like rigid with the academics. But what I realized is, you know, I feel like those first 5 years, because they were raised in like a reading household, that actually felt like that's not that saying that that's all that they need, but that was ingrained in them. So they're growing up strong academic. So it's like I feel good about that. But then they're also now see like they want to explore. They want to, you know, I want to be able to expose them to things that are out there. And it had to do with the fact that I was, you know, seeing a different culture, a different being within outside of how I was raised, you know, outside of my community, and you know, seeing that there's more to children and more that they can do other than just being in the book. So that was one thing that I saw, and one thing that I am changing within my own household.
You know what? I love that you share that, because one thing that I thought about and thinking about like how what I'm about to share was kind of like shaped by my identity and experiences. You know, same for me, and I know the same is true for Nafisa, just because I've known her so long. But I think so much is expected of us. I mean, and we just also happen to be three Black women. So much is expected of us in terms of like we have to be academically strong, right? Like it's hard to find like a middle ground in terms of society. You're either the ones who made it or you're them over there, right? And so I think that in terms of the way that I grew up and the messages that I received, it was like you're going to college, you're doing this, there are no options, you're going to be excellent, period. And so you're absolutely right. That's the same way that I started raising my kids. But one thing that you also shared, Edwina, was taking your kids outside the books. And I immediately thought about, and we know, all three of us know this because the three of us are also educators. But the reason why I know that from my perspective, that's so important, in addition to the experiences, but when we think about literature, and this is a whole different podcast episode, and we think about mainstream literature, what's put out there, we can keep our kids in the books, but then most of those books aren't even published by us or written by us, and so what I love about like giving our kids experiences is we're giving them opportunities to see the world and interpret the world through their own eyes, right? And not just a bunch of white authors, right? So I just wanted to share that part. I am excited that it seems that more and more Black and brown authors are becoming published authors, and I love it when we get to share our stories and we get to tell stories from our perspectives. And yes, there should always be opportunities for windows, but just thinking about that perspective. So I love that you share that around the experiences. So as we start to close out this episode, first of all, thank you so much for tuning in so far. Please let us know in the comments what has resonated with you. How has your identity shaped the way you've parented your children? And are there some experiences that we've shared that you can also identify with? We would love to know that. But as we wrap up for our final thoughts, what I'd like to know is I want you to choose one angle to take, just to kind of, give a little brief summary, but what would you say to your younger self prior to having children? So if you knew that one day you would have kids or you were about to have kids, what would you say to your younger self? Or what would you want your children to take away from you as a parent? So I'd love for you to choose one of those angles to take as we wrap up with our final thoughts. So again, what might you say to yourself, your younger self prior to having children, or what would you want your children to take away from you as a parent? And I ask that question because, we always say we want our children to do better and be better than we are, right? And we know that our parents wanted the same for us. So just think about, what would you say to your younger self? All right. So either of you can go ahead and speak on that first.
For me, my younger self, I would say not to rush the process, to really explore the world, get to know who you are, what is it that you want, like be satisfied with yourself first before settling into motherhood. Motherhood is great, but I think when I think about how I went into it really fast, like right after college, I was like a mother living like the whole household situation. And I didn't really give myself that room to just explore, find out exactly what I want to do before I became a mother. And so I would definitely tell my younger self to slow down. It's okay. Take your time. Spend some time with you first.
Hold on, what was that song we were listening to? The slow down song?
Oh, I don't know. But it was definitely saying slow down.
There you go. Oh, that's good stuff. Thank you so much for sharing. Nafisa, how about you? What might you say to your younger self, or what would you want your children to take away from you as a parent?
I think what I would say to my younger self is that it's okay to create your own path in motherhood, because everybody, when you're a first time mother, everybody got something to say. Girl, well, you need to do this, or you should do that, or don't do this, or don't do that. And it's just like coming from every angle. And I remember being like, just like it being overwhelming, and sometimes it influencing like how I would do certain things. And I would just to listen to yourself and to just create your own path, through motherhood, and reach out when needed. when you need to, but it's okay if somebody else doesn't do something that way. If that works for you and your household and that's what you want to do, then that's what you should do. Create your own path.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely right. So basically, don't buy that parenting for dummies book or something, whatever it's called. Listen, you got to create your own path, sis. So I guess since you two have shared related to that first prompt, what I would want my children to take away from me as a parent is the power of bouncing back, right? And so you will make mistakes. People, yes, have tried to write all types of books. And I'm not trying to knock your hustle or take any bread off your table, honey, if that's the type of book you wrote. But what I will say is you got to write your own book, as Nafisa said, and embrace the mistakes that you'll make and just apologize when you make them. So I want them to just see, parents are human. We make mistakes. We're not above anything. And so, just see what it is that you can learn about yourself and about your children and learn with your children. Because for many of us, we grow up with our children, right? We evolve. I hope we are evolve with our children, and I hope that they see the evolution and embrace it as a beautiful process. So, thank you two, as always, for joining me in conversation, and thank you all out there who have tuned in. I mean, we love, love, love getting your feedback. So please let us know what you thought about tonight's discussion. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and type in the comments what really stood out for you. What might you add to this episode as well? I hope that you tune in with us next week because we're going to take a deeper dive into communication, especially with our children. So it's been a pleasure. We will see you same place, same time. Peace out, everyone. Bye.